I know what the Word of God says. I believe the Word of God. But do you obey it? Do you obey it?
You know what? It's going to be when we stand before God, not so much that there are so many sinners, there's so many strangers.
He needs to fight to defend for that faith that was delivered one time to the saints, not multiple faiths. One doctrine was delivered for all time, and we are to contend for that doctrine, not for your denomination's doctrine, but for that doctrine that was delivered during those 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension.
Run from churches where there is no Bible. There's no cross in the theology. There's no soul-searching word. There's no repentance from sin. There's no mention of the blood of Jesus. Run! It's unclean. Run! Run from churches where the worship leaves you cold. There is no sense of God because they don't know.
This is True News. I'm Rick Wiles. President Donald Trump is in London to attend a NATO summit. One of the thorniest issues that President Trump and other NATO officials must confront at this summit is Turkey's decision to purchase the Russian-built S-400 missile system. It is also certain that the American president will demand that European allies pay more for NATO's expenses. The USA spends more on NATO operations than all the other European members combined. Without American money, NATO would collapse. Despite the enormous issues that President Trump must face in London, his domestic enemies wasted no time in their relentless campaign to embarrass and weaken him while he's traveling abroad to represent the USA. The House Judiciary Committee, chaired by Jerry Nadler, a Jewish socialist Democrat from New York, is scheduled to hold impeachment hearings this week while the president is attending the NATO summit in London. President Trump commented to reporters before departing Washington for London today. Here's a report from Reuters.
The Democrats, the radical left Democrats, the do-nothing Democrats, decided when I'm going to NATO, this was set up a year ago, that when I'm going to NATO, that was the exact time. This is one of the most important journeys that we make as president. And for them to be doing this and saying this and putting an impeachment on the table, which is a hoax to start off with. If you notice, there was breaking news today. The Ukrainian president came out and said very strongly that President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong. That should be case over. But he just came out a little while ago and he said President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong and that should end everything. But it will never end it because they want to do what they want to do. They're getting killed in their own district. I think it's going to be a tremendous boon for the Republicans. Republicans have never, ever been so committed as they are right now and so united. So it's really a great thing in some ways, but in other ways, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace for our country.
You send one of your lawyers to represent your point of view before the House impeachment inquiry.
Because the whole thing is a hoax. Everybody knows it. All you have to do is look at the words of the Ukrainian president that he just issued, and you know it's a hoax. It's an absolute disgrace what they're doing to our country. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, your True News correspondent, Edward Szall, is covering the NATO summit in London this week. We have a live feed now with Edward in London. Edward? Hello, Edward.
Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Hello from London.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Where are you right now?
We're actually right by where the center of many of the meetings will be occurring tomorrow and on Wednesday, right next to Kensington Palace. In the background, you actually can see the London Eye and the amusement park that is next to that iconic attraction here in the center of London. But Rick, the main issue I think that is coming to bear this week is not simply just the funding, but a lot of the nations here are going to probably be discussing if there needs to be a NATO coming up in the next half century, if not decade. I know if you saw over the weekend, the French President Emmanuel Macron raised the issue that NATO, its existing mission initially was to confront Russia during the Cold War. He believes that China and Russia are no longer common enemies of NATO nations.
I thought what was going to come out of this NATO summit was a declaration that China is the new enemy of NATO.
You're absolutely right. If President Trump gets his way, along with his Secretary of State, the president actually, his administration put out a statement prior to him boarding the plane, Air Force One from Joint Base Andrew yesterday. And part of it was that China is undermining, and this is his words, a rules-based international order. This is a quote from the statement. They are continuing to challenge the NATO, the face of security. China is actually seeking to create a greater presence and more influence across the globe. And NATO has a responsibility to not just confront it, but unify against it. I mean, this is sounding like they're reviving the same kind of boogeyman they used against Russia, that narrative, now for China.
Hey, Edward, what's the story about French President Macron and Turkish President Erdogan? They've been trading barbs back and forth about each other's brains.
Yes. So it first started with Emmanuel Macron giving an interview to The Economist, the Rothschild-owned Economist. And what he told them was that he believed NATO was brain dead, on life support, because they failed to stop President Erdogan from launching his invasion into northern Syria. Now, part of this is that France has kept a very close relationship, specifically a military relationship with the Kurds, and they saw this as potentially as a way to undermine not only their support for that group, but also their presence. A lot of people don't know that France had troops in northeastern Syria, the place where the oil fields are. So initially, Emmanuel Macron made that statement. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan shot back actually this past weekend and said it actually is the French president and his policies that are brain dead, and that NATO needs Turkey. Turkey maybe doesn't need NATO. We know this is on the back end of Turkey being sanctioned by the U.S., being bullied and heavily criticized for taking the Russian S-400 system. But part of this was that Turkey itself is being kicked out of the F-35 program, and in their mind, they are confronting terrorism. But that's the opposite of it. And President Erdogan said that he actually promised that when he comes here to London, he should be arriving tomorrow. When he comes here, he'll be telling Emmanuel Macron to his face that he thinks his ideas are brain dead.
That should be an interesting meeting. Hopefully you'll be close enough to capture some of that conversation between those two leaders. Going back to China, so the U.S. is attempting at this summit to have NATO declare China as the main enemy of the NATO alliance, and we have a video clip of President Macron of France arguing that China is not an enemy. In fact, I think he said both Russia and China are not enemies of NATO, which that leads us to ask the question, if Russia and China are not enemies of NATO, what is the purpose of NATO?
Well, absolutely. I don't think... Good.
Well, let's watch the video. Let's see what President Macron said, and then I'll get your comments after the video. Here's President Macron.
NATO is a collective defense organization. But against what or against who? Who is our common enemy? We need to clarify that, and it is a very strategic question. Sometimes I hear some saying that it is Russia or China our enemy. Is it the purpose of the Atlantic Alliance to identify one or the other as our enemies? I don't think so. Our joint enemy, clearly within the alliance, is terrorism.
So the French president named terrorism as the enemy of NATO. But how do you put a face on terrorism? Who is behind the terrorism?
I think the world's been trying to do that for about 20 years now, right? No one knows what a terrorist is past the names that we've given the organizations that we've covered on the program are clearly backed and armed and supported by the West and their allies. This point is something that he actually has a commonality with Turkey, right, on this? That Turkey also sees the issue to be terrorism, not Russia or China.
I agree. Hey, Doc Burkhardt wants to join in.
Well, Edward, and you're looking great there, Edward, by the way, and so we're glad that you're there in London for NATO this week. I'm reminded back to that summit that we went to in St. Petersburg, Rick, where President Putin, once again, if we recall, made the offer to Emmanuel Macron, even back then, 2 years ago. He said, hey, Russia can provide the defense for Europe. And that was like a seed that was planted there at that time. When we first heard that, we were like, what? What are you talking about? And now we see a shift taking place within the NATO alliance itself. So for the first time coming out and saying, is Russia truly our enemy?
In St. Petersburg, Doc, Emmanuel Macron was startled. We saw it. He was startled.
There was that shock on his face.
There was that nervous laughter. He didn't know how to respond. But you're right. Here we are now, 2 years later, and we're watching Emmanuel Macron say, Russia's not our enemy.
And even the leader, the leader of NATO itself, Stoltenberg, says that Russia, now look, get this, we're told day by day by day that Russia is ready to just invade Europe, invade the Middle East, ready to do all sorts of evil things and evil deeds all across Eastern Europe. But Mr. Stoltenberg today even said that Russia poses no imminent military threat. That's the whole purpose of NATO. That's the whole purpose of NATO.
Wait a minute, Doc. Stoltenberg said this?
Yes. So we actually have
he just undermined everything that they've been doing for the last 10 years.
That's why they've got to find a new enemy out there, Rick.
So it's China.
Right. So let's watch this clip. This is NATO's Stoltenberg actually saying that Russia poses no imminent threat to Europe.
Mr. Secretary General, you have mentioned the disagreements between the allies. Those disagreements are not critical, but they are multiplying since NATO decided to go back to its core task to deter Russia. Effectively, we haven't seen any real aggressive actions from Russian side towards NATO countries. Don't you think that it's a high time to think about the real change of NATO policy to face some real threats and not imaginary ones? Thank you very much.
So we don't see any imminent military threat of Russia against any NATO country. But what we see is a strategic challenge, and we see a Russia which is investing heavily in new modern capabilities, including nuclear forces, and a Russia which is violating a cornerstone arms control agreement in Europe, the INF Treaty, deploying missiles capable of reach European cities within minutes, and missiles which are nuclear capable. And we see a Russia which has been responsible for aggressive actions against neighbors. Georgia, Ukraine, but also have forces in Moldova without the consent of the government in that country. So, yes, we have not seen any aggressive actions against a NATO country. But the reality is that that's exactly why it is so important for NATO to continue to provide credible deterrence and defense, also in a more unpredictable world, and that's the reason why we have modernized, invested more, and increased the readiness of our forces over the last years.
Did you get that, Rick?
I did, Doc. First of all, the Russian buildup of their military in the past decade
has been in response to NATO.
In response to NATO's aggressive stance on their border.
Right.
NATO putting troops, tanks, rockets, missiles on the Eastern European border with Russia. Of course Russia responded because they thought they were going to be invaded. Suddenly, you have the NATO chief today saying there's no imminent threat. Then what has this all been about for the past 10 years? Why have I been warning week after week, if NATO continues acting like this, they're going to start World War III with this type of aggressive behavior. Suddenly he's telling us, well, there's no imminent threat from Russia.
Then why does NATO need to exist? His argument is we're going to need it in the future. Well, there would have been no issue with Russia over the past 10 years if NATO hadn't been pressing all the borders along Eastern Europe, actually taunting, trying to draw Russia in to a fight. And they've done that over and over again. And I'm not defending Russia by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the same as if somebody had antagonized a next door neighbor. They're going to respond to it accordingly.
Doc, they need a boogeyman in order to keep their jobs.
That's right.
They have to have a boogeyman.
So they can't say that Russia is an imminent threat right now. But we need an imminent threat right now. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to say China is the imminent threat and maybe Russia sometime in the future.
But China is Asian, it's not European, and NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Right. And I asked that question last week when Secretary of State Mike Pompeo made the announcement. I said, did China move? Is China in another part of the world now? Did it pack up and leave? But Rick, there are NATO forces that are serving right now in the Pacific. Now, how does that work? How does an Atlantic organization end up serving in the Pacific? So there's a lot of questions with this, and basically what we're seeing here is a 70-year-old, that's why this event is going on, by the way. This is the 70th anniversary of NATO. It's a big event, 70 years of time. What's happened in 70 years? Has NATO's purpose gone away? Do we need NATO anymore? And when we hear things from folks like Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel and others about is there a necessity for this continued antagonistic relationship with Russia when they depend economically, energy-wise upon President Putin and his nation?
You know, one thing, I'll bring Edward back into the discussion. One thing that Mr. Stoltenberg said was that Russia made aggressive moves in Georgia. Well, I clearly remember that flare-up of hostilities in Georgia. This is about 10, 11 years ago. I'm thinking maybe 2008, 9, right. Something like that.
It was absolutely, 2008, 2009, because I was in basic training when it happened.
Oh, okay, so you know, okay. But
we were being told we were about to go to war with Russia. I remember it very distinctly.
Really? Okay. So what I remember is that there were 3,000 Israeli military advisors in Georgia directing the war against Russia.
Yes.
And I also remember an Israeli official from the Israeli Ministry of Defense appeared on Israel Army radio, and basically what he said was, this very day, Israeli-made weapons are killing Russians in Georgia. I remember reporting that story because I remember asking the question, why are Israeli military advisors, 3,000 of them, in Eastern Europe? What's going on? How is Georgia affecting Israel's security?
And why is Israel even involved in a NATO effort at all? I mean, that's the real question at hand.
But Mr. Stoltenberg doesn't bring those points up.
And he also doesn't bring up the point that if they really believed that Russia took Crimea, if NATO really believed it, they would use every effort possible to get Crimea back, wouldn't they? If they really believed it. They don't really believe it because they know that the people of Crimea voted to leave the Ukraine and rejoin their homeland, rejoin Russia by their own accord, by their own will. And they keep trotting out the idea that, Russia is trying to steal Ukraine, trying to take away Ukraine. But Rick, if they really believed it, they would have NATO ships, NATO bombers going in there, liberating Crimea, right? But they don't do that because they don't really believe it.
Yes, because by democracy.
You look at some of those countries.
Yeah, go ahead, Edward.
Well, I was going to say, first with Emmanuel Macron, I mean, Emmanuel Macron's dealing with a civil revolution in his own country right now. You look at leaders like that who are dealing with very real threats to basically the stability of their government. We're talking about the Yellow Vest protests in Paris and throughout the other industrial cities of France. He's not alone. I mean, you look at Europe of the past 10 years. There's been populist revolution after populist revolution. It's either been peaceful through various attempts to elect a right-leaning government, or it has been violent. And there's also been color revolutions in that time block. I think for these leaders to try to convince them to keep this charade going, especially a charade that requires a large investment of GDP, money that is derived from the taxpayers and the businesses in those countries, it's just not feasible anymore. If a leader is going to basically avoid this basically blowing back on them in their own country, either through the ballot box or through a civil revolution.
Edward, I understand that there's a town hall event that's being held in conjunction with the NATO Summit. That this town hall event, its topic is the future of warfare. What can you tell us about this event?
Yeah, so this event is private. I have applied to attend it. We definitely will be given access to the video for this, but it's a private summit for leaders and think tank officials to attend prior to the main meeting with the other 29 members of the NATO summit that will be happening in Hertfordshire, which is northwest of London. Now, this meeting, really, I want to call it, it's essentially NATO bringing in the eminent thinkers in both the data and in technology development to create the tools for the future of warfare. And this isn't just simply in missile technology, satellites, tanks, but in the actual conduct in the cyber realm. Something that caught my eye. This event is called the NATO Engage Innovating the Alliance. And you think this would just be some silly symposium where military contractors bring in missile defense systems to try to sell them to other countries or other weaponry. But Rick, this actually has brought in most of the European officials attending the actual summit, to include the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Vadim Prystaiko, the Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg, Jon Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, will also be attending this. The General for NATO's Future Warfare Development is actually based in Norfolk, Virginia. It's called the Supreme Allied Command Transformation. That general will be there. There was a specific talk in this. I was going through the list and we see, what are they speaking about here? What is the discussion topic for this group, which also includes members from the Atlantic Council, Palantir, the RAND Corporation, the Munich Security Corporation? Well, this is a couple of discussions that will be discussed tomorrow. What is NATO's role in an insecure world? Invoking Article 5, a view from inside the NAC. In the blink of an eye, artificial intelligence, hypersonics, and their implications for future warfare. Another one, though, I know this is going to catch your ear. The battle for your mind, societal resilience, and the disinformation era. Another one, a global order challenged, allies in an era of great power competition. And the last one, looking ahead, the alliance in 2030. Rick, this summit is clearly not going to be purely for a discussion of budgets, an opportunity for leaders to complain about President Trump. Rick, I think this summit is not just simply even a shift to China, but a shift potentially against the civil uprisings in the countries of these NATO members. I think countries like Germany and France, they want solutions, specifically maybe in England. They want solutions to deal with the voice of the public, those who are frustrated with the elitism, the stubborn arrogance that's been displayed over the last 2 decades, especially in Europe. I think they want a solution against that. And their solution might be, of all weird places, the creation of a virtual reality matrix.
What are you alluding to, Edward? Are you talking about a NATO response to the populist movement in Europe?
Yes, and why I bring this up is I was looking back last year. What was talked about at this event, the NATO Engage Summit last year? On the top of the agenda was the populist revolutions which were being faced around the world. It was just the beginning of last year that, remember, Angela Merkel at Davos, when we were attending there, she called populism a cancer against society. And I think this thought has translated not just simply in the politics of Europe, but more so to their military alliance that in part is being propped up by the United States. The last part I was alluding to, though, is actually one of the talks, and you think this would just be military leaders and politicians attending this side, the only official side meeting for the NATO summit. There's actually a very well-known tech innovator who's attending this summit. His name is Herman Narula, and he is the founder and CEO of Improbable Worlds. Rick, he is actually the man who's going to be speaking as maybe the keynote guest at the session, which I mentioned is the In the Blink of an Eye, Artificial Intelligence, Hypersonics, and the Implications for Future Warfare. This man, Rick, is famous for pioneering a matrix in reality. He wants to make a real-life digital world in virtual reality that the poor, the unemployed, the angry maybe, the criminals can be placed into as an antidote or a medicine.
Are you serious, Edward? Is this? I've not heard this stuff before. You're freaking me out here with this stuff. This is NATO talking about. Actually, go ahead. I'm listening.
I know it seems unbelievable, and that's over the weekend I was looking to see can I find this man just describe it himself, and he's very proud of it, Rick, of his vision, his dream, not just for creating a virtual reality for people, but a virtual reality for the military. Earlier this year, Herman Narula, the CEO of Improbable Worlds, he gave a talk actually for Wired as his number 9 for Control. He said in this that the video games and the virtual reality that he had originally has been funded to create, and mind you, Rick, this man has gotten a $502 million investment from SoftBank. So this isn't just a simple pipe dream from someone who's been going to special meetings in Silicon Valley. He has $502 million under his belt in investment. It's arguably the largest virtual reality firm in the world. But this man at a Wired conference said, and he described this specifically, his vision for virtual reality, creating a multiversal self. This is the man who's speaking tomorrow at NATO, who's being brought into NATO. This is the talk from Herman Narula.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking this through, and this is the first time I've heard it. And Doc, are these guys thinking maybe the solution is not censorship and confrontation and oppression, but
distraction and control?
No. Group people together according to their similar interests. Let them have the world that they want in virtual reality.
Yes. And they'll control the real world.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
That's really an evil thought.
Let's watch Herman Narula giving a speech regarding his plans as far as virtual reality is concerned and how it can be used to help control the future.
Okay, let's watch it.
So I want to talk a little bit about the singularity. And my investor, Masayoshi-san, talks often about this. And it's an idea I've been thinking about a lot myself. What it should mean to people beyond a world where AI and autonomous systems create enormous wealth and productivity is a world where human beings have very little to do. Jobs are going to be automated at a fairly frightening rate. I think everyone here has some experience of the different trends in our society that are leading us to this direction. I think gaming could be a very important antidote to some of the challenges we might encounter in an automated society. Game worlds represent a place where labor doesn't really need to be automated. There's no point automating labor within a virtual world. The kinds of activities that game worlds support, the sorts of value creation they support, are intrinsically resistant to AI. They're in fact a kind of wonderfully quintessentially human activity. It's our culture abstracted away from the real world, put into a form where people can create value and engage with each other in unimaginable ways. So as this future comes about, and as automation takes place, I think games are going to become an increasingly important antidote and part of our society. Maybe even a very important place where, in an increasingly divided society, empathy and understanding and interaction across societal boundaries become possible. Who would have thought video games could save the world? But perhaps they can. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about what the far future might look like. So now here we do need to bring back VR and AI and all of the technologies that are going to be talked about over the next couple of days. In the far future, we should start to see virtual worlds which go well beyond even what I'm talking about today. artificial realities, places we can engage with as fully as with the real world. Pick your sci-fi of choice, whether it's The Matrix or William Gibson or Ready Player One. There's no technological fundamental constraint that means those futures are impossible. So we have to assume they will come about. And when they do, we have to wonder what our lives might be like. And I make this prediction. I don't think virtual worlds will replace the real world. I think we will find ourselves living these interesting multiversal lives, jumping between worlds, engaging with people and with activities that today we can scarcely imagine, but all happening in the context of a much larger, more rich experience of life.
And what's interesting about this gentleman, Edward and Rick, and Edward already knows this, of course, is that they've already secured contracts with the U.S. Army for gaming applications within a military framework. That's one of the reasons why he is at NATO, and he's going to be pushing this future event of the multiverse reality. And that's the first time I've heard that phrase, the multiverse reality that's being pushed out there. And so now NATO is thinking in terms of being able to use gaming and virtual reality applications in order not to fight Russia, not to fight China, but to control their populations, Rick.
It's the new sedative.
Yes. He called it an antidote. He called it an antidote.
They can't get any more fluoride in the brains of the humans, so now they have to go to VR.
And people will lap it up. They'll eat it up, won't they?
They will. I'm really, honestly, I'm surprised by this. This has caught me by surprise today.
And this is why we're not going to leave NATO. We're not going to leave NATO.
NATO's going to go VR.
That's right.
NATO's coming to your backyard. NATO's coming to your house, to your living room.
The world is the Atlantic now.
Yes. But you won't know that you purchased a NATO game. All right? You won't know that you downloaded a NATO app. You won't know that you're living in a NATO environment, a NATO virtual reality. Hey, this is why TruNews, what you just saw in that video, this is why TruNews follows technology. And we get a lot of flack from the Luddites that watch TruNews, who get very angry and get all worked up when we talk about technology. But what you just heard, what you just saw, this is why we have to follow this. They're creating a new world. And if you're unaware of what is being built, you're going to be swept into it. That's the reason TruNews follows technology. Not that because we're promoting it, it's just the opposite. We're telling people, get ready. This is what they're trying to push on us. Hey, Edward, are you hearing anything in London that NATO leaders are going to discuss space warfare?
I am. There was a press conference that Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, gave over the weekend. And he said that the new area of emphasis, of focus for the NATO alliance will be space. Specifically that over 2,000 satellites are deployed right now in orbit, the majority of them owned by the members of the NATO alliance. He wants to replicate, in part, what America has launched, the Space Force. I think NATO, and in part with the discussion of future weaponry, they want to create the weapons, lasers, missile defense technologies, maybe even nukes or kinetic weapons in space. Who knows where they'll go to the extent of this? But they want to have a role in securing that outer portion of the universe that Elon Musk and a lot of the tech barons have tried to already lay their claim with, passing what the United States wants. Rick, space, honestly, is becoming akin to deployment to the Pacific Ocean. I think NATO wants to have that to be their area of responsibility past Europe.
Hey, another topic you should listen for any discussion. South China Morning Post reporting that satellite images indicate that China has deployed an operational airship known as an aerostat in the South China Sea. The object could be seen floating over the island, which is now China's biggest outpost in the disputed waters. Photos were taken by ISI, the International Space. ISI. That's the Israeli, isn't it?
International Space Station.
I think it's a private organization that provides satellite data.
I think
right?
I think so.
Data for the Syrian strikes.
So. Anyhow, that's a topic that probably will come up. And then the other one is the naval exercises of Iran, Russia, and China. that are scheduled to take place this month, December. Iran, Russia, and China will hold joint naval exercises in the Indian Ocean on December 22nd through January 20th, 2020. So you have Russia, China, and Iran together in naval exercises. I don't know, Doc. That to me is going to restoke the fears that NATO is going to have to fight China and Russia.
Well, as encouraged as we were 2 years ago when President Trump put out the idea, why do we need NATO? Why do we need to even be a part of NATO? We provide most of the defense. Why can't it just be American defense? You know, now we're going deeper and deeper into it. We're not leaving NATO. We're not leaving anytime soon. We've got enemies imagined out there, and if we can't imagine them, we'll create them in virtual reality. So there's nothing happening with NATO.
Hey, one final military story. This is Times of Israel. An Iranian general warned that Iran's missiles are aimed at 21 U.S. military bases in the Middle East, and that Iran is prepared for the greatest war against the greatest enemy. This was a speech on November 29 by General Noor Ali, and he said that Iran has the ability to burn Tel Aviv to the ground. So that should get some discussion. He said Iran is the world's fourth strongest missile power in the world after the U.S., Russia, and China.
Yes. Number 4.
We forget about that.
Yeah. I'm sure even though the Prime Minister of Israel won't be attending the event, I believe they've called off his visit at the last minute now. I'm sure the United States delegation will take up the slack on that and raise that issue. I reckon the two stories you just mentioned before, it really shows you again how the world is shifting east. Because the thing is, if we've covered in this program, if it's correct that an ice age is coming, a mini ice age across the world, countries like Russia and even most of the countries in the West are going to have to build up a presence in the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean because those will be some of the only areas you can conduct trade during a mini ice age that freezes open ocean and a lot of ports, especially in the north.
Hey, that's a good point. I don't have the article with me. It's on my desk. And but over the weekend, South China Morning Post published an article about China's growing concern about their food supply in light of the stress and tension between the United States,
right,
and that Chinese government officials and military war planners are stepping up their planning and contingency strategies of how they're going to feed 1.2 billion people. So if we're going into a mini ice age, and we have the swine flu fever,
right,
that's wiping out 1/4 of all the hogs in the world.
Yes, and China depends heavily on pork production.
Yes,
very heavily.
I don't know if people heard what I just said. The swine flu fever currently underway in the world will kill an estimated 1/4 of all the hogs in the world. It's a devastating blow to the food supply of the world, and China would be hit the worst. And it really puts the United States in the driver's seat with China, because the U.S. can hold pork supply over China's head.
Right. In fact, if I was an evil person, that would be something I would dream up to do.
Kill the hogs?
Kill the hogs so they'd have to be dependent upon me for supply.
That would be evil.
That would be evil.
Well, we know our leaders don't think like that.
No, they don't think like that, so thank goodness.
Hey, Edward, at the time that we're streaming this live right now, has President Trump arrived in London?
He was scheduled actually to arrive, I believe, about half an hour ago. He would have landed in London Stansted. I believe that has occurred, and he's heading now to his hotel in central London for a morning meeting, essentially, with Jens Stoltenberg to start the summit off. So he is in town, Rick, and his first meeting will be a breakfast with the Secretary General of NATO.
And then what's the rest of the schedule for tomorrow? What will you be doing?
So I'll be monitoring the NATO Engage Summit while also seeing the updates from the bilateral meetings President Trump has with Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, and reportedly a trip to Downing Street to meet with Boris Johnson and his cabinet. So the president has that, and later in the afternoon, he's going to be going to Buckingham Palace to meet with Prince Charles and the Queen about basically the continued relationship between England and America, especially as England continues to attempt to leave the European Union.
Edward, I saw the photograph. I don't know if we planned it. I saw the photograph of your desk in the NATO press room, and very, very proud of you and TruNews that you're right there with all the big news media organizations of the world. You're representing the kingdom of God, and everybody who supports TruNews. We're all very proud of what you're doing on behalf of TruNews and the kingdom of God. And we know you will represent God's kingdom very well at the NATO Summit.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Rick. I will. I'll do you proud.
All right. Edward Szall in London attending the 2019 NATO Summit. We'll have more from Edward on tomorrow's Godcast of TruNews. Thank you, Edward. All right, Doc.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about the suppression of free speech. And over the holidays, I saw this really crazy story out of Germany.
Yes.
That Angela Merkel.
She's changed the definition of free speech, hasn't she?
She was doing some Orwellian newspeak. And this is what she said. She said that, basically, she said, free speech will have to be restricted if we're going to save free society.
Yes.
Now wrap your mind around what she said. If we're going to save freedom, we have to restrict freedom. Now, who would think like that other than an Orwellian mind control freak?
Right. In fact, from Orwell's books, slavery is freedom, war is peace, anger is happiness. I mean, these are the contrasts that he published, Orwell put out there.
Which is exactly what we have happening now.
It's exactly what we have.
The control of speech. And whoever controls the meaning of words controls the dialogue. And whoever controls the dialogue controls the conversation and the way the society is going. But don't lose sight of the fact that Angela Merkel, in her young days, I know we all did crazy things when we were young, but I never joined the Communist Party. Right, she did. Yeah. And she wore a uniform. She wore her little German commie uniform, and she was a member of the propaganda brigade. Imagine that.
Yes.
They put her in the propaganda brigade.
And she's still good at it. So
yeah, maybe she's still wearing her little commie uniform in her house when nobody sees it. Now, well, let me read this story. This is what she said. She said this at a speech to the German parliament. Quote, "For all those who claim that they can no longer express their opinion, I say this to them. If you express a pronounced opinion, you must live with the fact that you will be contradicted."
Which is okay.
Yeah.
That's freedom. I mean,
yes.
That's freedom of speech.
Yes.
I think if you have the freedom of speech, you can say whatever you want to, but you better be ready to live with, the response.
Because people are going to disagree with you.
Right. But then she goes a little further, doesn't she?
Yes, she said, expressing an opinion does not come at zero cost, but freedom of expression has limits. Those limits begin where hatred is spread. They begin where the dignity of other people is violated. The House will and must oppose extreme speech, otherwise our society will no longer be the free society that it was.
And if you watch the video of her saying this, there are members of the Bundestag that are out there voicing their disagreement, which I thought, all right, if you follow Angela Merkel's line of reasoning, they wouldn't have the opportunity to voice their disagreement.
That's right. And at some point, she will see to it that they don't have that opportunity. That's where they're taking us. That's where the technocrats, it's not just the left. You've got these mind control freaks on the right, too, because everything's controlled by the same entity. I call it the perpetual war, sleaze, corruption, and pedophilia party. And it's running Western society, United States and Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. It's all the places where the British monarchy has its roots. All right. That brings up Prince Andrew. We don't want to talk about pedophile, do we? But listen to what she said. She said, those limits begin where hatred is spread. Okay, now, if I advocated shooting somebody between the eyes, would that be hate speech?
I would think in most places, I would say 99% of places, Rick, that would be hate speech. Especially if you say you hate somebody and point a gun at them.
So if I said, I hate that person, and I wish somebody would just put a bullet between his eyes. If I said, hey, if you're going to go postal, going to go crazy, don't go into a shopping mall and shoot innocent people. Go to Vero Beach and shoot Rick Wiles in the head. Would that be hate speech?
Sure it would. That'd be hating you, right? Don't you have the same rights as anyone else? Don't you have the opportunity to be
should
protected?
That kind of speech be curtailed? Because I want to play for you. This is a soundbite from KLBJ FM radio, Austin, Texas. KLBJ, like Lyndon Baines Johnson, a former president of the United States who was part of the attack on the USS Liberty. But in this case, 3 of their morning talk show hosts this morning, today, in the morning drive hour show, called for my murder on live radio across Austin, Texas. Thank God that a TruNews supporter called us and alerted and told us, said, they're on the radio right now talking about killing Rick. And so we were able to listen and record the conversation. And I want to play this for you. Again, it's not some pirate radio station.
This is the major
2-watt FM station. This is one of the biggest radio stations, one of the oldest radio stations in Austin, Texas. KLBJ.
The oldest radio station in Texas.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the FM side, it's not the AM side. Right. All right. So they have 2 stations, KLBJ. They have the old AM news talk, and then they have the FM. So this is the FM side. We're going to play this for you. Here is their morning talk show host talking about killing me.
Let's do clip 1 of 2.
Show that he does, right?
Called True News.
But it's a pretty big, it's grown over the years. We know him because we've played him before, right? Rick Wiles is his name.
Rick
Wiles.
Let's hear it. Here you go. This is it.
The Jews work.
Okay, let's start that over. He said, this is the way the Jews work. In other words, a broad brush. This is the way all of these people of this race work. Race, religion, whatever you want to call it.
That's the way the Jews work. They are deceivers. They plot.
Yes. Wow.
They lie. They do whatever they have to do to accomplish their political agenda. This
is what I talk about when people, if you snap and go mass murder, don't go kill people at a mall. Kill this son of a bitch.
Well, no.
I'm not saying kill him.
Right.
I'm saying if you snap, why are you killing innocent people? Kill horrible people. Why do my friends have to die of cancer and this guy continues to breathe air? Put it right between his eyes. But I'm not telling you to go kill anybody. I'm just saying I don't understand why
What
the
does he
innocent
think
people
the
go after
quote-unquote
charlatans.
By the way,
Jewish people are doing?
By the way, we are 13 seconds into a 2-minute clip,
and I'm already uncomfortable.
I'm so
Yeah.
I would go to the jail for assault, but I'd beat the crap out of this guy, and I can't win a fight, but I could beat him.
Well, here's the problem. He's saying out loud the part that his people are only supposed to be thinking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You're supposed to veil your racism somehow.
Right.
And
right.
Jesus is a Jew.
Not anymore.
Jesus is a Jew.
Dale.
Impeach Trump movement is a Jew coup. And the American people better...
I'm going to give it to him.
So that was this morning on KLBJ 93.7 FM, Austin, Texas. Austin, be proud there, right, of that. That's the first clip of 2, Rick. And that it's in response to the Godcast we did a week ago Friday, the Juku broadcast.
Yes. In which what we did, we spent about an hour and a half.
Yes.
And we methodically showed our viewers the headlines from Jewish newspapers in Israel, Times of Israel, Haaretz, Jerusalem Post, plus the Jewish news syndication service and other, which is American.
And Jewish publications here in the U.S.
Yes. And so we showed how they are openly boasting that the leaders of the impeach Trump movement are Jewish members of the House of Representatives,
right.
Plus Colonel Vindman, Ambassador Ivanovich, Ambassador Sondland, a whole long President Zelensky, all. So we showed documented proof from the Israeli newspapers that Jewish people are in the forefront of the movement to impeach Trump. Yes, I called it a Jew coup. All right. And that sent them through the roof.
Right. It got us I timed out on YouTube because of the video. Facebook has now jumped in the fray and taken down the video. Yeah. And there have been about a dozen responses on Twitter to our video.
Yes, but thanks to the left, they have made that program go viral. Millions of people have watched it.
Yes,
Thank you
literally
so much.
Millions
have watched it, which means that it's now in circulation. People are talking about the high number of Jewish people in the impeach Trump movement.
Which is the last thing they wanted anyone to talk about.
Right. So it's now out in the open.
We have a second audio cut if you'd like to hear it as well. All right, so this is number 2 of 2. This is the same morning shock jocks in Austin, Texas today on December 2nd, 2019, wishing death on Rick Wiles.
People are going to be forced, possibly by this Christmas, to take a stand.
That's it. If there's a civil war and it's declared, I will go on a special mission to take that guy out.
What do you mean declared? That I feel like you're giving yourself an out right there to be like, well, they never declared it. I mean, yes, we murdered each other, but they never declared a civil war.
One group of idiots will have to declare themselves not part of the United States.
Question.
And the other half will say,
will I be an officer?
No, you're too old.
It depends.
What?
You're too old.
I got
I'm too old.
Someone
sneaky
sneaky picked a video of you.
All right, so for people that watch our program on a regular basis, you know that we have never advocated violence, never called for violence, never called for anyone to be taken out. Yet they can misconstrue the words as many times as they want. You cannot show us a single time where we have actually called for someone to be taken out.
Doc,
if that had been the case, we'd already been sued by now, right?
Doc, I'm anti-war.
Yeah, you're the ambassador of peace.
I'm constantly speaking out against war. And I repeatedly say that violence is not the answer. Violence is not the solution. I say it often. See, I got blamed for when we said that if the left continues on the impeachment of Donald Trump, I said the Trump supporters will hunt down the Democrats who did it. But I got accused of advocating it. Right. I didn't advocate it. I said, this is where it's going to lead.
This is where it's leading. We're not saying rise up.
No, I'm saying let's pull the country together. Let's back away from this cliff that's pushing us towards civil war. But I got blamed, It wasn't by accident, Doc.
Sure.
My enemies are liars.
Yes.
They're liars. They're professional liars. They get up in the morning, they're paid by people like George Soros to lie about Christian leaders. But then they've been doing that since Calvary. They've been lying about Christians, so this is nothing new. But here's the message I want to get across. So this was on KLBJ FM, Austin, Texas, 93.7. The morning show hosts are Dale Dudley, Bob Fonseca, and Matt Bearden. So Dale Dudley, Bob Fonseca, Matt Bearden. The radio station was recently sold by Emmis Communications to Sinclair Telecable, which is a subsidiary of Sinclair Broadcasting. And Sinclair Broadcasting put the radio station into a holding company called Waterloo Media. Now, Sinclair Telecable bought that station and 5 others about 6 months ago for $39.3 million. It's a lot of money. Right? Roughly $40 million for 6 stations. So it gives you an idea of what each station is worth. And, you know, I feel bad about this because I like Sinclair Broadcasting, Doc. I don't have any problems with Sinclair Broadcasting. They've never hurt me, ever. This is a brand new station. They've only owned a station for a very short time.
Right.
But they have employees who advocated my murder.
Yes.
And so I have to sue Sinclair Broadcasting. I have to sue Sinclair. I have to sue Sinclair Telecable. I have to sue Sinclair or Waterloo Media. I have to sue KLBJ. I have to sue Dale Dudley and Bob Fonseca and Matt Bearden. I have to sue the general manager of the station. I have to sue all of them. I'm going to do it. This is a promise. I'm going to sue them. They advocated that I be shot between the eyes.
Right.
This is not going to be allowed to go on. I will sue.
Now, this isn't just a matter of calling Rick a dirty dog or anything like that. It's one thing to, state your business, state your, you do have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom to threaten somebody.
Doc, we've said this in the past, okay? People can call me any name they want. I'm a big boy, okay? I put on my big boy pants every day. I'm okay, all right? If you come out here and speak, just what we said earlier about if you express your views, then you have to be prepared for the consequences, which is the right of people to disagree. But you don't have the right to murder. You don't have the right to advocate the murder. You can't say, I'm going to go there and take him out. I hope somebody puts a bullet between his eyes. See, that is incitement to violence. And this stuff happens to me whenever Right Wing Watch, which is a smear operation by People for the American Way, which is a Jewish-funded hate group. It is a Jewish-funded hate group to smear Christians. The only people that Right Wing Watch smears are Christians. Go to their website and look at all the pastors that are on their hit list. It's funded by wealthy Jews such as George Soros. The people that work there get up in the morning, they go to work, they have one assignment: smear Christian leaders. What a sleazy way to make a living.
Right.
But they do it for their god, Lucifer. So every time Right Wing Watch whips up this type of anger, we get death threats. And I've warned Right Wing Watch because they're going to get sued also. I've warned them in the past. See, some years ago, a gunman went into the headquarters of the Family Research Council in Washington and started shooting in the lobby, shot the security guard. General Jerry Boykin was upstairs in one of the offices. He was motivated by Right Wing Watch. He read one of their articles and went berserk. So we have these radio hosts today reading a Right Wing Watch article and saying people should go berserk and shoot this guy. So we're not going to tolerate it anymore. There will be lawsuits. I will respond on this one. because this is a threat against my life. You can call me names, you can do whatever you want to, it doesn't bother me. But when you threaten to come to my office or my home and shoot me, I have to call the police, I have to call the FBI, and we've reported this to the FCC, we've reported it to Travis County Sheriff's Office in Austin, reporting it to the FBI, we reported here to our Indian River County Sheriff's Office, because this is a threat against my life. And our lawyers are preparing a lawsuit against the people that I named. It will happen.
All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a second here. How would you respond to people that would say, "Oh, Rick, these are just some crazy guys on the radio in the morning. You know, they're just clowning around. They're just goofing off and everything. You know, just trying to do things for ratings." How would you respond to that?
Irresponsible. They're operating on an FCC licensed broadcast station. They have rules and regulations by the Federal Communications Commission. You cannot behave that way. You cannot do it. Doc, several weeks ago, this was after another Right-Wing Watch blast. It was on a Friday night, and Susan and I were already asleep. It was after 11:30 p.m. I think it was around 11:40 p.m. Susan woke me up. She said, "There's somebody knocking on the door." So I had to get my firearm. I go to the front door. I didn't open it. I asked, "Who is it?" A male voice said, "Police." So now I got to decide, okay, is this really a police officer out there, or is this an ambush? Am I going to open up the door and this is a home invasion?
And those are the kinds of things you have to think about now.
So I was, I'd been asleep for an hour or so. So I looked out the window and I saw a police cruiser in my driveway. So I knew it was a police officer. So I opened up the door, and Indian River County Sheriff's deputy there, a very polite, professional police officer, and he said that he was responding to a phone call from a woman in Colorado about something that I said. And I'm still groggy. I'm not fully awake at this point. And I'm trying to understand what he's saying. I said, I don't know anybody in Colorado. I don't understand what you're saying, officer. And he said, well, I'm here to check on your safety. I go, what do you mean my safety? What's going on? Well, this is what we found out. There was somebody on YouTube that night. I don't know if it was YouTube or Facebook. Somebody was
sure it was YouTube.
Yeah, somebody was doing live social media streaming, and they were showing on the screen my home address, saying, this is where this guy lives. Here's his house. Here's his street address. This is where you can get him.
And a concerned listener, concerned viewer
in Colorado saw it, called the police in Vero Beach, and said, I'm concerned somebody's going to hurt Pastor Rick. So the police came to my house. This is what we're dealing with.
Right.
Okay. So when KLBJ does a stunt like this, and I get a phone call early in the morning from an Austin supporter saying they're on the radio in Austin right now talking about killing you. Yeah, that affects my wife. That affects our staff. We have to look about what's going on security-wise around our property. We have to wonder, is this the day that one of these right-wing watch crazies actually shows up with a gun? Because that's what they're attempting to do.
Right.
They know what they're doing. They're attempting to provoke a lefty to shoot me. But I can tell you, right, KLBJ, Waterloo Media, Sinclair Telecable, the staff there, Dale Dudley, Bob Fonseca, Matt Bearden, the general manager of the station, you're all going to be served a lawsuit. That's a promise. It's coming. You will answer for it. I'm not going to look the other way. And I'm going to use the money to expand TruNews. You're going to help me grow TruNews because I'm going to collect a lot of money from you guys. All right? I don't know what else to say at this point, Doc.
I think that's all there is to say.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for watching True News. Pray for Edward. He's in London. There's some crazy stuff going on in London right now. Stabbings. Right? There were stabbings at The Hague.
Yes. Once again, and coordinated once again.
Yes. Terrorists released from prison by judges. Oh, that's what the lefties do. See, nobody wants to say, hey, how about the judge be dealt with in a stern way? He ought to be removed from the bench. The judge that released that terrorist who went out then and stabbed people. Okay? But that whole event was kind of strange because it was citizens who apprehended the man with the knife. They held him on the sidewalk
until the police got there.
Until the police got there, and then the police shot the guy on the sidewalk.
Dead.
That was kind of strange. It was very strange.
Yeah, because they had the guy restrained.
Yes. And the police shot him after they let him go. After they walked away from him. Then the police shot him. That's kind of strange, but hey, we have enough strange things going on here in the United States. I don't have time to deal with the strange things going on in Great Britain. But Edward's there, and I want you to pray for his safety because he's at a high-profile event.
Yes.
And Edward's doing a great job representing True News and the kingdom of God, and our enemies can just pull their hair out that he's there. It's too bad. We're not going to back down. We're not afraid. We're not intimidated, but we're not going to be mice, and we're coming after you legally. Legally. We're coming after you, those of you who are generating threats against my life. You will have to answer for it in a court of law. So, thank you so much for watching True News. We'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you.